Greetings and welcome to another Patch Notes video here at Words About Games, a weekly video series that lets us host discussions and post opinion pieces about our various thoughts on games, gaming, and the industry. Today I want to talk about something in games that stresses me out: multiple endings. Those super nerve-wracking games that give you a different ending depending on the choices you make, quests you complete, or getting totally screwed because you sneezed during a moment when you needed to hold a controller perfectly still, accidentally launching it in the air and having to watch a character you were quite fond of get brutally murdered because you dared to play while having a cold. Shout out to Until Dawn. I'll be focusing on just a few specific examples in this video, so potential spoiler warnings are in effect for the following games. I know I can't be the only person who finds out that a game I'm playing or about to play has multiple endings and starts getting anxiety about everything I'm doing in the game. Going into a game and knowing that every move I make could potentially give me an ending I don't want, or take an otherwise great story and give it an unsatisfying twist or climax, fundamentally changes the way I approach a game, and not always in a good way. There's nothing worse than playing a game that you'd be otherwise really enjoying, but instead of letting yourself get completely immersed in the fictional world, instead you're fretting over getting a quote-unquote bad ending that could potentially ruin the experience for you. And by bad ending, I'm not talking about the quintessential bad ending, but one that derails the story, doesn't fit the narrative, or provides a thoroughly unsatisfying conclusion to an otherwise excellent narrative. I call it Mass Effect 3 syndrome. I've been thinking about this recently while playing Katana Zero. Now, before I launch into my critique of the game's multiple endings, I want to preface this by saying it's a brilliant action platformer that I loved a lot, as my 1200-word video review of the game will attest. You should definitely check a look at it if it looks interesting to you. So because Katana Zero was a game that I was getting around to late, it came out in April and I only managed to get to it in July, I'd unavoidably heard a few things about the game, just from being a gaming YouTube person who follows gaming discourse and listens to like 10 podcasts where people talk about video games. One thing I knew about the game was that it had multiple endings, although I didn't know the specifics of what those different endings were or how to get them or avoid specifically bad or unsatisfying ones, just that they existed. This was a problem for me that became exponentially stressful as I started getting pulled into the world and narrative of the game and grew attached to certain characters. Instead of sitting back and being able to fully enjoy the narrative, I started to worry about every dialogue choice I was making or how I was going about completing certain missions, worried I was going to affect the direction of the story towards an unsatisfying conclusion. Mild spoilers for Katana Zero's story, but it turns out I needn't have worried too much, as the dialogue options really just unlock different scenes or flesh out the personality of the protagonist a bit. It turns out there's literally a single choice to make in the game that affects how the story ends. But the very idea that I could have such a profound effect on Katana Zero's ending made playing the game's conversations and making choices, both in dialogue and in certain gameplay sections, more stressful than they needed to be, because I didn't know what was and wasn't affecting the story or how I was affecting it. It's not that I'm worried about getting a quote-unquote bad ending. Some of my favourite games of all time have had bad endings, or even multiple endings based on choices you make throughout. What was stressful about it was that I was making uninformed choices that I knew could affect the story in ways I wasn't fully clear on, and I've played too many games where the experience has been partially ruined because I made a regrettable choice in the moment that led to the narrative taking turns that made it worse. When I talk about uninformed choices, I'm not talking about going out and spoiling the outcomes of the choices for myself, more that the game isn't clear about the choices I'm making and how they can impact the story I'm experiencing. For example, one game that absolutely nails giving players informed choices is Mass Effect 2. The game is very upfront about how the choices you'll make will affect the experience. It tells you straight up that you're building a squad to tackle what everyone considers a suicide mission.
Attacking the Collectors would require passing through the Omega-4 relay. No ship has ever returned from doing so.
You need to build trust amongst those that you recruit so they'll fight for you. As you interact with them and complete their loyalty missions, you not only turn them into a team, but also learn critical facts about them. Once you launch yourself into the suicide mission and land on the Collector base, you're presented with a series of high-stakes decisions made quickly and under pressure about who should perform what tasks, leading strike teams, repairing heat vents, and so on. If you make bad choices, people will die. It's stressful for sure, but not in a way that makes the game a worse experience, as in my earlier example with Katana Zero. Instead, the stress comes from the level of immersion, because the suicide mission that is Mass Effect 2's climax is a masterclass in choice and consequence and mission design. You're making fully informed choices the entire time, You know people might die if you choose poorly, but by playing the game, interacting with the characters, learning about them, and building their loyalty to you, the team, and the mission, you're given all the information throughout the game to make the best possible decisions. Take the vents, for example, which require someone with technical expertise to disable weapon systems and open doors. You can choose anyone you want for this assignment, but only 3 characters can actually survive it. Tali, an actual engineer, Legion, a Geth artificial intelligence, and Kazumi, a hacker. Anyone else will get shot and killed failing to close a door quickly enough. There are other options that might even seem viable, until you remember the context the game has given you that rules them out for the job. Jacob straight up volunteers and has doubled up as your weapon technician for the entire game, but there have been story moments where he's outright failed to hack mechs earlier in the game, which another character specifically mentions when he pipes up. Similarly, Mordin is a genius scientist, but his specialty lies in biology, not technology. You're given all the context you need to make informed decisions throughout the final mission, which is what makes the decision-making process throughout the entire sequence thrilling as opposed to off-putting. And in the end, even if you make all the worst possible choices and lose your entire team, you still complete your mission and destroy the collector base. No matter what, Mass Effect 2 still has a satisfying conclusion, but that conclusion can come at a heavy cost. But there are plenty of games that have you making uninformed choices. Some work within the genre, like Until Dawn, where you can make far-reaching choices that can get characters killed many hours after you've made them. It works because it's essentially a slasher movie in a video game, where the genre demands that making bad decisions equals people dying. Most of the time, the genre and setting of the game makes these uninformed choices work quite well, aside from my lethal sneezing fit. Rip Jessica. There are a couple of decisions that can really mess you up later on in the game, where you can literally make a choice that will get a character killed many hours later, and there's nothing you can do to stop it. But by and large, Until Dawn is the rare exception that proves the rule, so to speak, where having you make uninformed decisions benefits the tone that the game is going for. It still stresses me out, but that stress is part of what makes the game an enjoyable experience. It helps that the game was literally marketed to point this out to anyone who played it. But in a game like Dishonored, for example, uninformed decisions can actively ruin the immersion and the unfolding narrative to the point that by the end, I'm not really invested in the outcome of the story. I love Dishonored. As far as immersive sims go, it's up there as one of the greats, but the game features an invisible mechanic that tracks how many people you kill. Murder too many people, and you get the high chaos ending, which is pretty dissatisfying. So if you're like me and you aren't great at stealth, you have 2 options. Grit your teeth and actively play the game in a way where you're having less enjoyment in the moment, or play to your preferred playstyle and doom yourself to an ending that doesn't really fit the narrative. I naturally chose a path where I could enjoy playing the game itself, even though this led to me kind of checking out of the story as it barreled to what I considered a thoroughly unsatisfying climax to an otherwise excellent game, simply because I play stealth games in a particular way. There are far more egregious examples of this, like Detroit Become Human, where if you mess up 1 or 2 key decisions, you'll be doomed to march in slow motion towards a thoroughly terrible ending with no path to redemption, as happened to me when I accidentally reacted to a QuickTime event and killed someone I otherwise wouldn't have, had the game not trained me to react quickly to button prompts appearing on the screen. This has more to do with game design in general rather than choice mechanics specifically, though it is worth mentioning that Detroit isn't really great in this department either, for a whole host of reasons we covered when we reviewed the game last year. Nier Automata sidestepped a lot of these potential issues by simply making its endings sequential. Rather than having different endings tied to making uninformed choices or punishing you for playing in a specific way, the game simply lets you see its endings one after the other, by letting you play through the game again and again from different perspectives, throwing you into entirely new situations and seeing the story take place in multiple ways. Nier only has one real meaningful choice right at the very end, in one of my all-time favourite twists in a video game, which I won't spoil here, but you'll know exactly what I'm talking about if you've reached the credits of Ending E. Basically, Yoko Taro and the team at Platinum that made this game are geniuses, and Nier Automata is one of the best stories ever told in gaming, especially as it's a story that could only be done in a video game. There are ways to do choices and multiple endings that don't impact the enjoyment of the game or the satisfaction of the narrative arc. Sadly, even some really awesome games fall into the trap of punishing you for the game itself not giving you the context you need to make informed choices during your playing it. And while this doesn't make a good game bad, Dishonored and Katana Zero are both still great games, I'm less likely to have fun while playing them simply because I'm getting too stressed out trying to make the best choices I can to avoid giving myself a worse narrative experience. While that stress can sometimes be used to great effect, like in Mass Effect 2, it only works because the decisions I'm making are fully informed by the context provided by the rest of the game. When I know I can have an impact on the course of a story by making choices without being given that context, or by not even knowing I'm making critical choices, it pulls me out of the experience and ruins a bit of my immersion in the game. That's not to say choices that affect a game's story are bad, or that multiple endings are bad, not at all. Mass Effect 2, Nier Automata, and Until Dawn are just a few examples of how great these mechanics can be in games. But when I'm placed under the threat of ruining my own story, I tend to start overthinking every aspect of a game, usually to the detriment of the experience as a whole.